Laura Romiti from Uruguay, and today I will be talking about the ABC of planning equitable lessons in the EFL classroom. So, our objective will be to present strategies that you can take home right away in order to plan lessons that are more equitable for everyone. Just a little info about myself, or what we call positionality in the academic sector. I am Uruguayan, I am a woman, I am queer, disabled, I'm white, I'm a teacher, and a lifelong learner. And I'm sharing all of these not because I love oversharing, but because it shapes the way I see the world and the way I teach. I believe in education as a human right, and I've been working on equity and social justice for about 5 years now. I follow a communicative approach when I'm teaching English and also culturally sustaining pedagogies that originated with Lansome Billings and Paris and Italy. I also hold a lot of credentials in accessibility in education, universal design for learning, and others. All right. So, what is the agenda for today? We talked about positionality and objectives already. I'm going to give you the definitions of accessibility, equity, and inclusion so that we're all on the same page here today. We will discuss some inequities in the EFL classroom. We'll talk about why equity matters, right? Why are we talking about this? We'll have some guidelines for lesson planning and then a live Q&A session. So let's get started. Accessibility refers to the ability of an individual to enter, navigate, comprehend, and use features of an environment that could be physical, digital, or conceptual and more abstract. What I love about this definition is that it does not talk about disability. It talks about accessibility for everyone, regardless of their disability status. And so when we talk about inclusion, that means involving active, intentional, and ongoing efforts to create environments where everyone feels welcome and this sense of belonging, like they have a seat at the table. Yeah, so they can fully participate in whatever it is that we're doing. And that means celebrating differences, promoting open dialogue, and asking people to just be themselves in this space. Now, when we talk about equity, we're talking about each of us getting exactly what we need to survive or to succeed. And this can look very different depending on the situation. It could be access to opportunity, to networks, to resources, support. And so equity is different for all of us. I'm sure you've seen this image before. It has three panels. In the first one, there's a man, teenager, and a small kid trying to watch a baseball game through a fence, through a wooden fence. And so if we give everybody a box to stand on, which would be equality, only the man can see what's happening in the field. The teen and the boy cannot. Now, when we switch to equity and we give everybody what we need, we still have three boxes, so we have not changed our resources at all. We have redistributed them in a different way. So now the teenager has one box he's standing on, the child is standing on two boxes, and the adult is standing on zero boxes. And now everyone can see the game. So this is equity, but it's not enough. What we want to really get to is justice, which is the third panel, in which we don't have any boxes, so we're not offering any support to anyone. But the barrier has been removed because the wooden fence is no longer there. Yeah. So even though I'm talking about equity today, let's not forget that a real goal is to get to justice. So what kind of inequities do we have in our classrooms that maybe we are not aware of? Let's get started with the first one, native speakerism. To this day, people who come from countries where English is spoken as a native language tend to have better roles in teaching. They get paid more and they have more opportunities, regardless of whether they have a teaching credential or not. Another issue that we face is the hierarchy of English variations and dialects, which sometimes leads to overcorrection. So just because I have an American accent does not mean that I have to correct someone with a British accent. So if my student comes in and they talk about water, can I have some water? I should not correct that because that is proper pronunciation. Yeah, it just doesn't match my variation, but that's okay. That also leads to the idea of a proper English. It unfortunately does not exist. There are many variations all around the world. So what we can talk about is appropriate English for this situation or another situation. And this happens a lot when students learn from TV shows or music, that sometimes they use words that are not appropriate for a classroom, but they're not wrong. If my student says, I ain't got time for this, well, that's fine. That's perfect. People speak like that. It just may not be appropriate for a lesson. But we should not correct things that are not um, improper, so to speak. We also have the issue of standardized international exams, which, as we all know, are expensive. They are not accessible for people with disabilities. Um, and that also creates inequities in who gets to access and who gets to succeed in terms of English certification. There's also a lot of bias towards students with disabilities. It's very common in some contexts to hear students with dyslexia say that they've been told that they could never learn English because of their dyslexia, and that is not true. We know, and the research shows that they can do it. They just need a little bit more support in some cases. And we also face bias in cartoonish representation of different ethnicities and cultures in books and teaching materials. Yeah, so like we have the Mexican kid who eats tacos every morning and wears a sombrero, and that's not helpful at all. And last but not least, the elephant in the room is colonization and imperialism. We cannot forget that we're teaching a language that has colonized many different countries, and that still does in a more subtle way. And that affects the way people feel towards this language that they're learning, and also the relationship that they might have to the countries where English is spoken. So, why does it matter? Why should we strive towards being more equitable? Well, first of all, because education is a human right, and so it's a moral imperative to support this human right. It's also the law in many countries. For example, in Uruguay, we lifelong learning is a right that everyone has, and we have to support it as teachers. And it's also part of teaching professional standards all over the world. So if we're not being equitable, we are being unprofessional in certain terms. And let's be honest, a wide range of students are already in our classes. So, we can bury our heads in the sand and pretend like nothing's happening, but they're here. And so, are we going to welcome them or not? And that means having to teach everyone as they come. So that's why it's important for us to try to be more equitable so that these students have better learning experiences. How can we do that? Well, I'm going to offer some tips that I'm sure most of them or some of them you're already doing. They do not require a lot of extra effort, but we have to be intentional in doing them, and we have to want to make a change in our practices. So first of all, have a clear lesson plan. And that might seem obvious, but for those of us who have been teaching for a really long time, sometimes we just come in and be like, well, I've taught this lesson a million times. I know what I want to do. I know how to get there. I'm going to wing it. But our students need to know exactly what's going to happen in this lesson, and for us to have a clear guide. We also need to set goals that are flexible and relevant, especially if we're working with adults or teenagers. They need to know, why are they here today? Why are they missing out on so many other things that they could be doing instead of sitting here in our class? And that's going to help with engagement. We should include different types of materials that show different ways of being and understanding the world, because representation is important. I need to be able to see myself in those books or in those materials. And that doesn't really happen if you belong to marginalized or underserved communities. We also have to give choices for activities to develop autonomy. So, for example, we can work a certain vocabulary by doing a crossword puzzle, by playing charades, by writing. Yeah, but do not decide beforehand how you want to do it. Give the students a menu of options of activities and let them choose what works for them or what they're more interested in doing. And that means also including different types of interactions in the classroom so that everyone can do individual work, pair work, group work, depending on the type of activity and what they feel more comfortable with. Obviously, we're going to need scaffolding. We know that some students need a little extra support, and so that should be part of our lessons as well. Maybe have some sentence starters, for example, if you're doing a speaking activity. or keep a list of connectors on the board, etc. And always have a clear assessment. Yes, so how can I tell if the student has reached the goal for the lesson? And they have to know that they're going to be assessed in that sense as well. Now, it could be formative or summative, but what's important is that we avoid strict time limits because that is not very accessible for a lot of folks. What else can we do? Well, here we're going to UDL or Universal Design for Learning territory by providing different formats for the same information. So instead of everyone watching a video, I can give options. So you can watch a video, you can read an article, you can listen to a podcast to find out the same information. And if you're doing a face-to-face class, give options for movement. If you're using videos, make sure you have subtitles and transcripts. And I always get a little bit of a pushback from English teachers like, oh, if you put subtitles on, they're not really listening, they're not working on their listening comprehension. Well, a lot of people need them to process language, but also it's always helpful when you're learning to see the words as they're written and as you hear them at the same time. Make sure to include all text in pictures, so it's a short description of what the picture shows that is relevant for the activity. Give clear instructions in separate steps, and that is very useful for people who struggle with executive functions. So instead of just saying, well, let's do activity 4 in our books, which is kind of vague or ambiguous, go like, well, step 1, open your book on page 34. Step 2, look at the instructions on activity 4. Step 3, do the activity, and so on and so forth. And once again, if we talk about representation, we have to ensure that different cultures, ethnicities, and family types are shown without bias. For example, when we see a picture of a family in the books, it's usually mom and dad and the 2 kids. Well, but is that the way our families look? Our students' families look? Where is the grandma who takes care of the kids? Where is the family that only has one parent, and so on? Yeah. And it's important that we see ourselves in the materials, that our lives are shown in what we consume, whether it's media or textbooks. Make sure to clarify language or symbols. Yeah. And also use examples that are relevant for your students. So if you know that a student has a certain interest, well, you can take that into consideration when you're thinking of your examples, right? And something that's always important is to include activities that promote reflection and metacognition. So it's not only about doing the learning, but also thinking about the learning. Yeah. And that is a way in which we can ensure that our lessons are a bit better. It's because we're asking our students to think about the process as well, not just the end result. And that is giving us feedback and information that we can use to plan our own lessons down the road. So, if we had to summarize, what do we need to keep in mind for equitable lessons? Representation is important. Show diverse groups of people doing different things. Offer choices in terms of activities, in terms of how we express those results. So, do I always have to write a report, or can I do an oral presentation, or can I create a poster? Can I do other things? Put on a play to show how much I have learned. And encourage self-reflection because that's the way to go. Have our students think about what they're learning as they're learning it, and also, what do they think they can improve down the road. And as I said earlier, use everything that you learn, all this feedback that you're getting constantly from your students to customize your next lesson. And be conversations, because when we start seeing people where they're at, the floodgates open sometimes, and they share things that they were too afraid to share before, and that's okay. Let's have those difficult conversations, which are part of working with in an equitable fashion. And I know this might seem hard or awkward or uncomfortable, like maybe I do not want to have those conversations right now, and that is okay. But if you do not feel overwhelmed by everything I have just shared with you guys. Because what's important is that you're trying, that you're making a sustained effort to be more equitable. And as the great Dr. Maya Angelou said, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. And that's exactly the path we're on. So thank you all so much for your time.